There are truths about yourself that you spend years avoiding, as if ignoring them could make them vanish. But the psyche is not a place that obeys repression forever. It stores, it waits, and then it emerges when you least expect it. Carl Jung called this force the shadow, the hidden part of your soul, filled with the fragments you exiled, the impulses you condemned, the memories you refused to revisit. And the paradox is cruel. The very things you try to bury are the ones that quietly take control. The shadow you keep ignoring is already steering your life, deciding your fears, shaping your desires, and dictating your relationships. Imagine the human being as a house. The rooms are the parts of yourself you accept. The living room, where you welcome others, the kitchen, where life's warmth happens, the bedroom, where intimacy hides. But there is also a basement, dark and cluttered, filled with what you didn't want to deal with. That basement is the shadow. It holds the things you didn't have the courage to face: envy, greed, anger, lust, bitterness, but also strength, vitality, and creativity that you denied because someone once told you they were dangerous. You locked them there, thinking you were protecting yourself. But basements have a way of whispering through the cracks in the floor. How many times have you surprised yourself with a sudden burst of rage? How many times have you envied someone and immediately silenced the thought out of shame? How many times have you noticed that the very people you criticize the most resemble aspects of yourself you deny? This is the shadow making itself known. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about those words. The shadow is not just psychological decoration. It is the map of destiny for anyone who dares not face themselves. Children learn early what is acceptable and what is not. A boy who cries is told to be strong. A girl who speaks her mind too loudly is told to be quiet. The child, in order to be loved, pushes pieces of himself into the basement. And so, generation after generation, we build masks, polished selves that look beautiful on the outside but hide a prison underneath. Society praises the mask and fears the basement. But every mask has cracks. Every prison has an escape route. What you hide does not disappear. It grows teeth in the dark. Jung often spoke of projection. This is the trick of the shadow. When you refuse to see something in yourself, you see it in others. A man who refuses to admit his own arrogance will be intolerant toward arrogant people, seeing in them the monster he fears to acknowledge in himself. A woman who represses her own anger will be overwhelmed by the anger of others, feeling victimized again and again, never realizing that what she rejects outside is a reflection of what she buried inside. Projection is the shadow's language, its way of pointing the mirror toward your face while you swear it is always about the other. And what happens when we ignore the shadow for too long? It erupts in compulsions. The drink you cannot resist, the relationship that repeats itself with different names but the same pain, the words that slip from your mouth before you think, all of these are the shadow's handwriting on the pages of your daily life. You can try to deny it, but every denial makes it stronger. Like a child neglected, it will scream louder, demanding to be seen. Like a fire left unattended, it will spread until it consumes what you tried to protect. The shadow is not merely darkness. Jung insisted it is also gold. Because in repressing parts of ourselves, we not only bury the bad, but also the good that was misunderstood. A child scolded for being too bold hides his courage. A woman mocked for her imagination hides her creativity. A man told his passion is dangerous hides his vitality. What we repress becomes twisted in the dark, but when we dare to bring it back to light, we find gifts we had forgotten we owned. The shadow, then, is both monster and treasure chest. It is dragon and gold at once. Facing it requires courage. To walk into the basement of the soul is to encounter cobwebs of shame, dust of guilt, and shadows of fear. It is to realize that you are not only the good person you show the world, you are also the one capable of hatred, envy, and destruction. This is terrifying because it breaks the illusion of purity. But Jung argued that wholeness is not achieved by pretending to be perfect. It is achieved by embracing that you are both light and dark. You are saint and sinner, angel and beast, creator and destroyer. To deny this is to remain fragmented. To accept this is to become whole. Look at your dreams. Have you ever been chased by a stranger? Have you ever fought a figure who seemed both terrifying and familiar? Jung found that the shadow often visits us in dreams, wearing masks of monsters, criminals, or threatening figures. But these are not enemies from outside. They are pieces of your own psyche knocking on the door. They want recognition, not annihilation. To kill the monster in your dream is symbolic of refusing to integrate it. To turn toward it, to listen, to dialogue, is the beginning of integration. Your shadow dreams are not punishments, they are invitations. But integration is not easy. Most people prefer to live in ignorance, polishing their masks, pointing fingers at others, blaming the world, fate, God, or society for their struggles. Few dare to descend into themselves, to see the beast in their own reflection. Yet this is where freedom lies. Because as long as you deny your shadow, it will control you. The man who denies his greed will live enslaved by money without ever admitting it. The woman who denies her lust will be haunted by forbidden desires that erupt in shameful ways. The person who denies their anger will explode in destructive outbursts they cannot explain. To integrate the shadow is to look in the mirror and say, yes, that too is me. To admit your envy, your selfishness, your pride, your rage, and instead of casting them out, to ask, what is their purpose? Envy can become inspiration when you realize it points to what you desire. Pride can become dignity when you learn to stand in your worth. Anger can become protection when you use it to set boundaries. Even selfishness can become self-preservation, the capacity to say no when your soul is in danger. Every piece of darkness, when integrated, becomes a tool for light. This is why Jung said that the shadow, once integrated, makes you more complete, not less. It does not turn you into a worse person, it makes you a real person. Because what destroys us is not the shadow itself, it is the refusal to see it. What poisons us is repression, not darkness. Acknowledge the shadow and it becomes power. Ignore it and it becomes poison. So ask yourself, what do you criticize the most in others? What patterns keep repeating in your life? What dreams keep returning to you, with faces that scare you? These are doors into the shadow. Do not close them. Do not run. The more you run, the stronger the shadow becomes. The more you face it, the more it transforms from tyrant to teacher. And here lies the first truth. The shadow you ignore is already living your life for you. Every reaction you don't understand, every repeated mistake, every haunting attraction or repulsion is the shadow's hand on the steering wheel. The question is not whether you have a shadow, you do. The question is whether you will continue to let it drive while you call it destiny, or whether you will take the courage to sit beside it, acknowledge it, and slowly, painfully, but truthfully, reclaim your place as the conscious driver of your own existence. If the shadow was only darkness, the path would be simpler. We would fight it, defeat it, and cast it away. But the paradox is that within the shadow lies not only what terrifies us, but also what completes us. The shadow is not the enemy of the self, it is the forgotten twin, the exiled sibling, the voice you silence to be accepted. And yet it whispers. It whispers in your failures, in your forbidden fantasies, in the patterns that return like an echo across the years. The more you silence it, the louder it roars. Think about the people who most irritate you. The arrogant, the greedy, the selfish, the lustful. What if I told you that these qualities resonate with you precisely because they belong, in some measure, to you? Jung said that what we most criticize in others is often what we repress in ourselves. The projection mechanism is merciless. You point your finger at another and 3 fingers point back at you. When you condemn arrogance, it may be your own pride that you have not embraced. When you judge greed, it may be your own desire for abundance that you have not allowed yourself to admit. When you recoil from lust, it may be your own longing for passion that you have suffocated under a mask of propriety. This does not mean that everyone you criticize is innocent, or that every judgment is false. But the intensity of your reaction is the sign. If your disgust is disproportionate, if your hatred burns with inexplicable force, the shadow is involved. It has projected itself outward onto the figure of the other, so you can continue to avoid seeing it within. In this way, enemies become mirrors. Your rivals, your opponents, even your abusers may embody parts of your shadow you have yet to own. And this truth is uncomfortable, because it means the world is not only filled with others, it is filled with you. The shadow also appears in compulsions. Have you noticed how some desires seem to drag you by force, as if you were possessed? A person swears to stop drinking but finds themselves at the bar again. Another promises not to fall for the same kind of partner but is seduced by the same destructive charm. A man vows never to lose his temper again, and yet explodes at the slightest provocation. These compulsions are not mere weaknesses of will, they are eruptions of the shadow, forcing its way into consciousness because it refuses to stay buried. The more you suppress, the more violent the return. And yet, if you dare to turn toward the shadow, something extraordinary happens. You discover hidden power. Jung believed that integration of the shadow is not annihilation but transformation. The energy you spend fighting yourself becomes energy for creation. The passion you repress becomes art. The aggression you deny becomes courage. The selfishness you condemn becomes the ability to protect your own boundaries. Every dark instinct is raw material for growth. The shadow, then, is not a prison, it is an untapped reservoir. But why do so few people face it? Because to meet the shadow is to shatter the illusion of who you think you are. Most people cling desperately to their self-image. I am a good person. I am kind. I am humble. I am moral. But the truth is more complex. You are kind, but you are also cruel. You are moral, but you are also tempted. You are humble, but you crave recognition. To admit this is to risk the collapse of the mask. And people fear that collapse because it threatens their acceptance, their belonging, their fragile sense of identity. So they prefer to live in lies, polishing the mask, while the shadow grows stronger behind it. There is a myth that illustrates this perfectly, the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll, respectable and moral, tries to separate his good self from his evil self. But when Hyde is released, he becomes uncontrollable. The more Jekyll tries to suppress him, the more Hyde dominates. This is the danger of denying the shadow. When you split yourself, the denied part does not disappear. It becomes monstrous. Integration is the only path. To look at your Hyde not with horror, but with curiosity. To ask, what does this part want? What strength does it carry? What truth does it hold? Dreams also play a crucial role here. Jung said that the shadow often appears in dreams as someone of the same sex, threatening, ugly, or frightening. But these figures are not punishments, they are invitations. When you are chased in a dream, it is not because the unconscious hates you. It is because the shadow wants to be seen. Every monster you defeat in a dream is, symbolically, a piece of yourself asking for recognition. And if you dare to turn and face it, you may find not an enemy, but an ally. Integration of the shadow is also essential for relationships. Consider how often people fall in love with their opposite. The disciplined person falls for the wild spirit. The quiet one is enchanted by the loud, passionate one. The moralist is seduced by the rebel. This is not mere coincidence. It is the unconscious seeking balance. You are drawn to those who embody what you repress. Love, then, is not just romance, it is projection. You are not only loving the other, you are trying to reclaim your lost self through them. But if you refuse to acknowledge this, relationships become prisons. You blame the other for carrying your shadow, while you refuse to own it. This is why relationships fail. The traits that fascinated you at first become unbearable later. The wildness that seduced you becomes irresponsibility. The discipline that attracted you becomes rigidity. The passion that inflamed you becomes suffocating. Because you expected the other to carry your shadow for you, instead of owning it yourself. Only when you recognize your projections can love become true, when you see the other not as your missing piece, but as a whole being, while you take responsibility for your own darkness. The shadow is not only personal, it is collective. Jung saw this in history. Societies that repress their aggression erupt in wars. Cultures that deny sexuality become obsessed with it in perverse ways. Communities that repress individuality create tyrannies. The collective shadow is the sum of all the personal shadows that have not been integrated. And when nations refuse to face themselves, they project their darkness onto others, onto enemies, scapegoats, minorities. Every genocide, every war, every systemic oppression is the shadow of a society erupting into the world. And yet, the same law applies. The shadow cannot be destroyed, only integrated. A society that acknowledges its aggression can channel it into sport, creativity, innovation. A culture that acknowledges its sexuality can celebrate it with dignity instead of perversion. A community that acknowledges its individuality can create freedom instead of tyranny. What is true for the individual is true for the collective. Repression breeds destruction, integration breeds transformation. To begin this work is to practice radical honesty. Ask yourself, what am I most ashamed of? What do I hide even from myself? What qualities in others trigger me the most? What patterns keep repeating in my life? These are clues. To journal about your anger, to confess your envy, to name your lust, to admit your hunger for recognition. This is not weakness. It is the first step toward wholeness. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, cannot happen without shadow work. You cannot become whole by ignoring half of yourself. But remember, integration does not mean indulgence. To integrate your shadow does not mean to act out every impulse. It means to own them, to dialogue with them, to find their positive expression. The man who owns his aggression does not need to fight everyone. He learns to channel it into protection and courage. The woman who owns her ambition does not need to manipulate. She learns to lead with clarity. The person who owns their lust does not need to betray. They learn to live with passion and honesty. The shadow is energy. Integration is direction. And this is the second truth. The shadow you ignore is not only hurting you, it is robbing you of your power. Every time you repress, you give away vitality. Every time you deny, you weaken yourself. The unconscious, left in darkness, rules you from behind. But the unconscious, brought into awareness, becomes fuel. The shadow ignored is slavery. The shadow integrated is freedom. To live without confronting your shadow is to live half a life. It is to walk through existence as a mask, polished for the world, while your depths remain uncharted. The shadow waits, not to punish you, but to make you whole. Yet most people will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid it. They drown in work, they chase distractions, they numb themselves with substances, they hide behind endless entertainment. They call this living, but it is only running. The truth is that the shadow cannot be outrun, because it walks inside of you. Wherever you go, it follows. Carl Jung believed that facing the shadow is essential for individuation, the process of becoming yourself. Without it, you live as a fragment, a divided being, a puppet of forces you do not understand. With it, you begin to walk the path of authenticity. But authenticity is costly. It demands the death of illusions. It demands that you admit, I am not only light. I am not only good. I am capable of cruelty, envy, lust, greed, deception. And at the same time, I am capable of courage, compassion, brilliance, creation. Wholeness does not come from choosing one side and denying the other. It comes from embracing both. The greatest danger of ignoring the shadow is not only that it controls you, it is that it shrinks your life. Every piece of yourself you exile is a piece of life you cannot live. The person who represses anger cannot set boundaries and becomes a doormat. The one who represses ambition cannot achieve their potential and lives in mediocrity. The one who represses desire cannot love fully and lives in sterile relationships. The shadow you ignore is not only darkness, it is wasted possibility. To integrate the shadow is to expand. It is to grow larger than the mask, to inhabit the full spectrum of being human. It is to say, yes, I have rage, but I will use it to fight for justice. Yes, I have desire, but I will use it to love with passion. Yes, I have pride, but I will use it to honor my worth. When you integrate, you no longer fear your impulses, you channel them. You no longer fear failure, you learn from it. You no longer fear your own depth, you swim in it. The shadow ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally, a reservoir of power you never knew you had. But this path is not linear. Integration is not a one-time event, it is a lifelong dialogue. The shadow changes as you change. New layers emerge, deeper fears surface, hidden wounds rise. Each stage of life reveals another mask, another basement, another darkness to be embraced. This is why Jung insisted that the journey of individuation is never finished. It is the great work of a lifetime. To become whole is not to arrive. It is to walk, to face, to embrace, again and again. And yet, the rewards are immense. Imagine a life where you no longer sabotage yourself, where your relationships are not prisons of projection, but spaces of true connection, where your creativity flows because you are no longer afraid of your desires, where your courage rises because you are no longer afraid of your anger. Imagine a life where you do not need to pretend, because you are whole. This is not a fantasy, it is what happens when you stop ignoring your shadow. The collective also longs for this. Look at the world today, polarized, divided, filled with blame and projection. Nations project their shadows onto each other, cultures demonize what they secretly desire, communities destroy what they secretly envy. The wars outside are reflections of the wars within. If enough individuals faced their shadows, the collective shadow would lose its grip. Peace outside begins with peace inside. The healing of the world begins with the courage of individuals to descend into themselves. So how do you begin? Start with awareness. Notice your triggers. Pay attention to what irritates you, to what you criticize, to what you secretly desire but condemn. These are signs of your shadow. Then, instead of running, turn toward them. Journal about your envy. Admit your anger. Explore your desires without judgment. Speak with honesty about your shame. These acts of radical honesty weaken the shadow's grip. They bring light into the basement. They transform poison into medicine. And when the shadow appears in dreams, do not dismiss them. Pay attention to the figures that chase you, to the strangers that terrify you, to the grotesque images that disturb you. These are your inner guides, speaking the only language they know, symbol. To work with dreams is to work with the shadow directly. To listen to their messages is to listen to your own soul. Remember too that integration requires compassion. You cannot beat the shadow into submission. You cannot destroy it with hatred. You must embrace it with love. To look at the parts of yourself you despise and say, "You belong to me. I will not abandon you." This is the true alchemy of transformation. Hatred deepens division. Compassion heals it. The shadow does not need punishment. It needs recognition. The paradox is that the more you embrace your shadow, the more light you become. Not because you deny darkness, but because you integrate it. You stop being split and your energy flows whole. The shadow, once an enemy, becomes a guide. It shows you where you are incomplete, where you are hiding, where you are afraid. It does not vanish, but it changes shape. It becomes a companion on the journey toward your true self. And this brings us to the final truth. The shadow you keep ignoring is not only controlling your life, it is calling you to live fully. Every fear, every envy, every forbidden desire is a doorway. Behind it is not destruction but expansion. Behind it is not evil but wholeness. If you dare to open the door, you discover that what you feared most is what you needed most. The shadow is not the end of the path, it is the beginning. So ask yourself with courage, what am I refusing to see? What am I running from? What keeps repeating in my life like an echo I cannot silence? These are your invitations. Do not waste them. Life is too short to live half of yourself. The world is too fragile to carry the weight of your denied darkness. Face it. Embrace it. Integrate it. Because only then will you stop being a puppet of fate and become the author of your own destiny. Carl Jung once said, "I would rather be whole than good." To be good is to play by rules, to wear masks, to fit into what others expect. To be whole is to embrace your shadow, to reclaim your gold, to walk in truth. And truth is liberation. The shadow you keep ignoring is controlling your life. But if you dare to face it, it will no longer control you. It will empower you. It will complete you. And it will whisper, no longer as a tyrant, but But as a guide, welcome home.